In 2006, when I was in my senior year of high school, the Duke Lacrosse case was all anybody could talk about, especially Nancy Grace.
That two innocent people may have possibly just had their
good
lives ruined.
Lord.
You're saying it's not possible they're innocent. That's not
No,
even
I'm
in the
not
realm of
saying it's
possibility.
not
It was like this every night. And I mean, I kind of get it, okay? This case had everything you could ask for in a sensationalized national story. You had socioeconomic disparities, you had Me Too overtones before the phrase had even been coined, you had privilege, you had race factors. There was blood in the water, and naturally, all of the sharks who profit off of these kinds of cases came swimming quickly. Side note, if you've never read Bonfire of the Vanities, you really should. I read it earlier this year, and while it's a novel, it is such a perfect depiction of the kinds of charlatans these sorts of stories attract and how they operate in our media and political ecosystem. Definitely check it out. But in case you were still a kid when this all went down, as I kind of was, I was a teenager, it all started when a Black female dancer named Crystal Mangum accused multiple members of the very, very white and very affluent lacrosse team at Duke of her. But now, almost 20 years later, Crystal is admitting on camera that she made the whole thing up.
And I testified falsely against them by saying that they raped me when they didn't, and that was wrong. And I betrayed the trust of a lot of other people who believed in me. And made up a story that wasn't true because I wanted validation from people and not from God. And that was wrong. And I hope that they can forgive me.
We got to run the tape back. There is a lot to dissect here. First, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we dive in today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. Okay, so first, here's a quick recap.
In 2006, Mangum told police she was sexually assaulted by three men, Colin Finnerty, Reed Seligman, and David Evans, in a bathroom at a Duke Lacrosse team party where she had been hired to perform. The blockbuster allegations igniting a national firestorm about race, class, and privilege on college campuses.
I think they might get away with it just because they have money.
Every member of the Duke University lacrosse team is innocent. You have all been told some fantastic lies.
People were eating this up. It was headline news every single evening. It was all over every single magazine cover. If you were at the grocery store, like, you could not avoid this story. These men were not just being accused, they had a national witch hunt going on, which of course sent Nancy Grace into a tailspin because she is a ghoul.
It's going to be on a jury now. That's right. Indictments handed down, arrests made on at least two young men. We're expecting yet a third indictment in the Duke Lacrosse scandal. Let's go straight to Clark Goldbender, our producer. What can you tell me about these two young men?
They come from some nice homes in the shadow of New York City, Nance. Let's first start with Colin's home. It's in Garden City, New York.
I'm sorry. When did you get on a first-name basis with a defendant in a case?
Well, I'm not.
Okay, Mr. Finnerty, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Finnerty's home is assessed at $1,900,000.
I'm asking you about the family. Why are you giving me $2 million? What does that mean to me?
That's how much their house is worth, where he comes from.
And
in Garden City, New York.
Your point is?
I thought you would be interested in their backgrounds. We have the others.
Rich? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I'm telling you, they do have some nice homes, Nancy, and we also have one from Reed Seligman. His comes in at about $1,300,000. A very nice area as well, Essex Fells.
Okay, what is this?
It's about a half hour away from Manhattan on the Jersey side. So let's take a look at the house of the parents of the alleged victim. Their home comes in at around...
Wait. Are you trying to say that the victim is going to be outgunned by money in court?
I'm not trying to say anything, Nancy. I'm letting the stats make sure the stats are doing the talking.
Okay, and let me throw a stat at you.
Okay.
False reporting, false sex assault reporting is somewhere between the low numbers of 2 and 8%. Okay, so you can roll all that money together, and it means not a hill of beans in my assessment of this case. Are you saying they're going to hire high-priced lawyers? Is that where you're going?
I'm not going anywhere. I have some more stats
Okay,
for
go
you
ahead,
if you're
go.
interested.
Go.
Take a look at the incomes of these 3 towns where all 3 of these players are from. In Garden City, it's around 100,000. In Essex Fells, it's about 150, which is very, very high in the United States. And in Durham, North Carolina, $43,000. And lastly, where they went to school, if you're interested, these 2 private schools, they clock in at about $23,000 each. And of course, where the alleged victim went, it's free.
I want to go to Stephen Miller with the Duke Conservative Union. Stephen Miller, what's your response to the indictments handed down and the arrests?
Well, I think I speak for many students when I say that we're very, very concerned that 2 innocent people may have possibly just had their lives ruined.
Lord.
You're saying it's not possible or innocent. That's not even in the realm of possibility.
It's not possible, but a grand jury has heard evidence and deemed this fit to go to a trial.
Right, and we're saying that
ever hearing what the victim has to say, you're saying the grand jury is wrong.
I'm not saying I'm convinced at all.
The victim is lying, and your first problem is 2 innocent people.
I didn't say that. I said we're concerned that it's possible that 2 innocent people may have had their lives ruined because this case does have many irregularities and many inconsistencies.
Do you have a sister?
Yes, I do, but I would appreciate it.
I assume you've got a mother. I mean, what your first concern is that somebody's falsely accused?
Don't tell me what my first concern is, please. My first concern when I first heard these
out of your mouth. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't wear hearing aids.
No, I didn't say that was my first concern when I first heard these allegations. Was that a innocent woman had been raped? That was the first thing that came to my mind, and I think came to anyone's mind. But as the facts started to come out, there was many irregularities and inconsistencies that troubled me like many other people. You've talked on the show about how she had bruises on her the day after. But a photo taken at 12:03 before the alleged rape occurred shows that she had bruises and open sores on her body. We also have the 911 call.
That's not what Newsweek says.
No, at 12:03.
Yeah, that's not what Newsweek says.
That in the report, it says that there are already bruises at 12:03.
Let me get another reaction from
I'm so glad society has finally woken up and started trashing this woman. It could not have come a moment too late. This is, she drives me nuts. I hate to admit this. I liked watching her in high school before my brain fully formed, back around like the Casey Anthony and like Lacey Peterson cases. I watched her a lot of evenings. But as soon as my brain fully formed and as soon as I got around the criminal justice system and was able to identify her as what she is, which I'll get into in a minute, she's like nails on a chalkboard to me. I cannot stand this woman. I don't just think that she is annoying to listen to. I think she is actually evil. I loved last year when that huge case was going on in Idaho, and I think this was shortly before they had identified Brian Koberger as being the suspect and arrested him. She was on scene in Idaho every day at the house where those students were killed, and literally the neighbors started writing stuff like this on their walls. F you, Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace is a goal. Like, they wanted her to leave and made it so widely known. And I just love that because she loves to come in and act like she is just this like huge defender of victims, right? She's on the side of justice and she's just a crusader for the poor people who've been harmed by these evil monsters who are out there. But like, actually, she's the monster. Like, I honestly believe this woman has helped to put multiple innocent people in jail, and you better believe she wanted those Duke Lacrosse players to be among them. I have never known a commentator to get it so consistently wrong, who everyone I meet cannot stand, and yet she just keeps failing up over and over. I'm pretty sure she's like a Fox News contract now. This woman is atrocious. She will say absolutely anything. She doesn't see any nuance ever whatsoever, and this is so indicative of how prosecutors in general think, which is what she was before she decided to spin that into a media personality and career, a very lucrative one, I might add, where she profits off of other people's misery, where she takes advantage of victims to elevate herself, and where she is never actually concerned with truth or justice. But like, this is how most prosecutors are, okay? It's not just her. I mean, she has found a way to monetize it in a way most of them do not. And I think she stands out because being a female district attorney is still pretty rare in this country, actually. Most of them are white men. But to a T, I'm telling you, get to know some prosecutors. Start talking to them. They do not accept that they could be wrong. They are very rarely interested in actually trying to figure out the truth. They are unilaterally focused on proving their case and getting the harshest sentence that they can at all costs. And they very, very often do bend the law in order to get that. We know that in the number of wrongful convictions we have discovered in our criminal justice system, which is like thousands, I think 19% of them trace back to prosecutorial misconduct, with them doing things like Brady violations where they are withholding evidence from the other side that could be exculpatory. Like, a lot of these people are actually just really, really bad. And they rarely face consequences for any of the things that they do because they get immunity. Yes, you heard that right. Prosecutorial immunity, which is somehow even broader than the qualified immunity that we give police officers. Essentially, they cannot be held liable. They cannot actually face accountability for doing things that are wrong, so long as it is in like the general course, their general line of work. Okay. It's very similar to how we saw the Supreme Court recently rule for presidents when it came to Trump. I disagree with this across the board. I think people who are in office should have more accountability, more scrutiny, and worse repercussions when they violate the law, particularly when they violate the law in a way where it impedes other people's liberties and freedoms. Now, fortunately for the Duke Lacrosse players, they were actually exonerated long before Crystal admitted that she lied. In fact, in a very rare twist of fate, the prosecutor in their case not only was held accountable for his misconduct, he even got disbarred and served a day in jail. I cannot name a single other time that has ever happened in history in this country. Do you know how bad you have to screw up to face any consequences as a prosecutor? Like, I genuinely had to start digging into this even more when I found that out. I'm like, what did he do? There was a district attorney in Mississippi who kept trying to prosecute a man for a murder and send him to death row. I believe the defendant's name was Curtis Flowers, and he was constantly doing all kinds of things to skew the end results. Like, this guy was planting evidence, he was paying witnesses, he was striking people off the jury over their race, like huge no-nos, things you cannot do. But all that would happen is that the case would get all the way up into the higher courts, and they would discover that this was not a fair trial because this prosecutor is wiling out down there in Mississippi. And so the case would get overturned, but nothing happened to the prosecutor. He just kept getting to retry the case again, which, by the way, a death penalty case cost about $1 million more than sending somebody to prison for life without parole. So in podunk, broke Mississippi, this guy is getting to spend that amount of money 8 times, where he keeps having all this misconduct happening, and he doesn't even get a slap on the wrist until finally the attorney general, I think a new one got elected, stepped in and intervened. That is how wildly prosecutors can misbehave without repercussions. So the fact that the prosecutor in the Duke Lacrosse case got disbarred and went to jail blows my mind. So anyways, I went digging, and here's what I found. Apparently, they DNA tested all 46 white members of the lacrosse team. There was one lone black guy on the team that they excluded, I guess because she said it was the white boys that did it. And they all failed to match any of Mangum's claims. Like, there was no actual forensic evidence in any way indicating that this happened. There were no witnesses. Like, there was no proof. And yet the DA just kept going for it. He was determined to put these guys in jail. And like, this went pretty far. Duke University apparently canceled the remainder of their lacrosse season that year. The team's coach resigned amid the controversy. And it went so far as 3 of the players, Reed, Colin, and David, actually being indicted on charges of rape, sexual assault, and kidnapping based on Mangum's testimony alone. So not only did they not have any evidence, but also apparently during this time, Mangum kept changing her account about the alleged assault, and she was just acting very unreliable. She apparently had been intoxicated and displaying very erratic behaviors before and after the party. Like, she was not a credible witness. And I will get into this more in a minute. I don't like looking for the perfect victim, right? I absolutely can't stand that. People often behave in ways that will not make sense to you, both when they are a victim or when they are the loved one of a victim. And too often, prosecutors and police use that to indict them and prove guilt. So I don't like that. But when somebody is changing their story, behaving erratically, and there's nothing else backing up their account, I don't think you have a case. But it kept getting worse and worse, okay? Like all of this stuff was coming out. People were really starting to question the narrative, but the prosecutor was determined to pursue this case. And that is for one reason and one reason alone, which is that he was up for re-election and he really needed to get the black vote to win. And this is what people have to remember. These people are elected, okay? Which means you can take them out of office, you can put them in office, but a lot of the decisions that they make are based on getting reelected, okay? And so they will often seek very high profile cases. They will often push to get their name in the headlines because that helps their chances. Now, the defense apparently presented time-stamped photos and phone records that contradicted Crystal's timeline of events. It turned out that Reed, one of the guys who had been indicted, had an airtight alibi and was not even at the party during the time that she alleged the assault happened. But the prosecutor just kept going. He kept going into the media. He kept slandering these guys like he was licking it up.
Do you recall making statements to the media in the early part of this case about the players' wall of silencers or something to that effect?
Yes, sir, I do.
And do you recall making statements about if they didn't do anything, why do they need a lawyer?
Yes, sir, I did.
And other matters about them exercising their right not to testify. You remember making those statements?
I'm not sure specifically about testifying, but I did make statements to that effect, yes, sir.
And then it came out that he had actually withheld exculpatory evidence. Again, that sounds really bad, and it is really bad, but not that rare at all, okay? Not that rare at all. But particularly, he had hid the DNA results showing that Mangum had DNA from multiple men who were not lacrosse players on her at the time of the accusations. In December of 2006, which I think had been, 7-8 months this went on, that these guys were being dragged through the mud, the North Carolina Attorney General Roy Cooper took over the case, and the prosecutor, Nifong, recused himself. And then in April of 2007, Cooper declared the three players were innocent, calling them victims of a tragic rush to accuse. But like, good Lord, damage is done. Can you imagine? Can you imagine trying to return to school, trying to have any kind of normalcy after all of that? How gross. And not only, would the damage be done in that regard, but I think there's probably still a substantial number of people who just simply never quite believed it, right? They still have that shadow of doubt hanging over their heads. I've seen this firsthand because, as you guys know, if you watch this channel, I overturned the death penalty in 3 states a number of years ago. So I've worked around a lot of people who've been wrongfully convicted, notably many of the people who have been DNA exonerated from death row itself, okay? And that means that DNA has actually proven that they were innocent. And yet the number of people I would have look me in the face, look them in the face and be like, they weren't actually innocent though, they just got off on a technicality. They just refuse to believe that wrongful convictions ever happen or exist. So I am sure this has continued to impact these guys over the past nearly 20 years. Now, after the Attorney General stepped in and saved the day for these guys, they actually received settlements from Duke University, and they later sued Mike Nafong, the prosecutor, and others who were involved in their prosecution. Some of those lawsuits were settled, so they probably got some kind of money out of them. Others were dismissed, but they have had to just go on and resume their lives. Crystal, on the other hand, man, she already showed her true colors a long time ago. So she was never charged with making false allegations, but obviously her credibility was pretty much destroyed. People already thought she was a liar before she came out and admitted this on camera. But in later years, she actually faced unrelated legal troubles, including a 2010 conviction for child abuse and a 2013 conviction for second-degree murder after stabbing her boyfriend, which she claimed was in self-defense, but police found otherwise, and homegirl is currently in prison as we speak. Nifong, as I said, was disbarred in June of 2007 for his ethics violations, including withholding evidence and making false statements. He served 1 day in jail for contempt of court and declared bankruptcy to settle the civil suits. The Duke Lacrosse program was ultimately reinstated, and the team eventually rebuilt its reputation, winning multiple championships in later years. So I guess it's as close to a happy ending as you could hope to get here. But I don't know. For me, the true happy ending, the true like justice in this matter would be policy change. Number one, so that more prosecutors would actually be held accountable as this one was when they have blatant misconduct present in a case. I've been completely red pilled over this. If that's even, I don't know how to use the pill language. It all gets very confusing, but I have been completely awakened to how many wrongful convictions are in our system, how easily you can be framed for something, how willingly many people often participate in the cases that lead to wrongful convictions. We're not just talking police, we're not just talking prosecutors, we're talking the lab technicians, we're talking people who give testimony both falsely and just because they really don't have that good of a memory and they overestimate their own skills in weighing in. There's just so much corruption, so much that can go wrong. And if you think that it can't happen to you, I am here to tell you it most certainly can. And if it does, it's going to be really, really hard to prove it and to get to that ultimate exoneration unless you've got money, okay? It's very expensive. Very, very expensive. And most people don't have the money it takes. They don't have fight the government money, okay? Because the government has attorneys on salary. They can run up the clock all day. They don't care if they spend 5 years trying to lock you up. You, meanwhile, cannot afford to pay an attorney for that amount of time to defend you. Everything is stacked against you in the system should you have this kind of fate befall you. The other kind of policy change we need is more stiff penalties for people like Crystal. Now, obviously, she's already gotten herself incarcerated on another matter that seems like it was somewhat inevitable given who she was as a person and just the character that she has shown throughout this entire incident. But people who make false accusations against others often do get away with it. And I want to be clear because this is something that is often used to invalidate the overwhelming numbers of women and some men who are true victims of sexual assault, right? The vast majority of people do not lie. The estimates show around 2 to 10%. Obviously, this is a very difficult thing to measure. You're trying to measure who's lying, but from what we know, okay, about 2 to 10%. That's a pretty low number compared to the number of people who are victimized in this way every year and compared to the number of people who are victimized in this way and who get no justice, which is most of them. Police are really, really bad at solving crimes. That's mostly not even what they do, okay? That's very little of their job functionality left at this point. Go check out clearance rates in this country if you don't believe me. It's like well under 30% of these kinds of cases are even cleared. And cleared does not mean there's a conviction. It doesn't even mean there's an arrest. It just means that police think they maybe have an idea who did it, okay? It's like a check next to the box of we sort of think we know who did this case. It does not mean that the actual victim gets any kind of closure or justice whatsoever. And we know that many of the people who are committing these kinds of crimes are repeat offenders. So it is something that police should be taking seriously. And unfortunately, they don't. That's not where they put their resources. But when you have people like Crystal that do this kind of thing, they make it even harder for the true victims to get justice, to be believed, to get resources. So I think that she should have the book thrown at her for this kind of thing. It's crazy to me that she just flippantly came on camera as like, oopsie, I lied. Oops, funny little thing about me is I made that whole thing up. Whoops. And then she says, I hope they can forgive me.
I hope that they can forgive me.
You hope they can forgive you? Why would they forgive you? What have you done to in any way make that up to them or to make that up to society? The amount of resources that got wasted trying to get justice for you while other women who had actual true allegations got nothing, got zilch. I'm glad these men are finally fully cleared from any suspicion, but in my book, this is not justice. All right, guys, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you've not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.